Welcome to Land of the Bible. I'm David Sussman, your personal tour guide here in the land of Israel. And in today's episode, we are going to travel along the Gospel Trail, which was established by the Ministry of Tourism and the Jewish National Fund. The Gospel Trail follows the journey that Jesus took from the time when he was kicked out of the city of Nazareth, his hometown, and he traveled east to the village of Capernaum, located on the Sea of Galilee, where he established his ministry and met his first disciple, Peter. The Ministry of Tourism here in Israel has invested millions of dollars so that Christian pilgrims visiting our land can experience their scriptures in an authentic way. The entire path travels roughly 63 kilometers, from here in Mount Precipice all the way to Capernaum, traveling over several mountains, fields, and national parks. It can be journeyed with a large bus, small vehicle, or if you're adventurous, by foot. In today's episode, we'll be traveling through some of the more historic places along this route, beginning with Kfar Kana, where Christians believe Jesus performed his first miracle, where he turned water into wine. We'll be going to Kibbutz Levi, where the Horns of Hattin, an extinct volcano, is located, offering us the first vantage point of the Sea of Galilee. From there, we'll head to the Mount Arbel Cliffs, a national park here in Israel that has some of the most beautiful hiking in the entire Galilee. And even if you do not travel this route by foot, it's well worth stopping here and doing the 1.5 to 2 hour hike down to the bottom near the shores of the sea. We'll go to Kibbutz Ginosar, where in the 1980s, a boat was discovered dating back to the Second Temple period and may have well been used by some of the disciples of Jesus as they fished in the Sea of Galilee. We'll go to Mount Beatitudes and Tagba, where he fed the multitudes, ending our journey in Capernaum, visiting a Second Temple period synagogue that Jesus may have very well preached in, as well as seeing the home that belonged to Peter's mother, where Jesus himself lived in. So join us as we travel the Gospel Trail. Even though the Gospel Trail begins once Jesus leaves the city of Nazareth, it's still important to come here and to visit the city, as there are many important sites pertaining to Christianity, from Mary's Well to the Church of Annunciation. There's also the Synagogue Church, which is believed to have been the main synagogue here in Nazareth, which was just a small village during the time of Jesus. Many Christians believe that when Jesus returns from the desert to Nazareth, it was here that he began to preach to the people, which ultimately resulted in him getting thrown out of the city. You'll also notice that there are a lot of minarets here in Nazareth, and this is due to the fact that today there's a large Muslim population that lives here in the city. They opened up a large marketplace known as a shuk, and here many tourists like to buy souvenirs from their time in Nazareth. A great place to visit while here in Nazareth is the International Center for Mary of Nazareth. The center has many different aspects to it, from rooms that can be used for worship, gardens for meditation, a large cafeteria which can be used for lunch or dinner, as well as a multimedia presentation that is divided into 4 different rooms and lasts for roughly about an hour, that takes you through the Jewish scriptures from the time of creation all the way through the destruction of the Second Temple and the Jewish people returning to the land of Israel. And then it moves to the Christian scriptures and details the life and times of Jesus. However, the highlight for many of the visitors are the ruins that I'm sitting in right now, which the center claims that many of them date as far back as the First Temple period, or roughly 800 BCE. Many of them do in fact date back to the 1st century CE, which of course is the time period of Jesus. Archaeologists have discovered clay jars and cisterns, as well as a silo, and even an oil lamp that comes from Jerusalem, which has led them to believe that the family who lived here was Jewish and that they most likely traveled to Jerusalem for the 3 festivals of Shavuot, Sukkot, and Passover, and purchased that oil lamp as a souvenir to bring back with them here to Nazareth. All in all, the center here is a perfect place to visit while in Nazareth to get a complete picture of the time that Jesus spent here in the city. Let's now continue as we travel along the Gospel Trail.
There are moments in life that define you and leave you forever transformed. Like a once-in-a-lifetime journey to the source of your faith. Walk in the steps of Jesus and experience history beyond its words. Sail the ancient Sea of Galilee to the holy shores of the River Jordan. Your journey begins here.
Our first stop along the Gospel Trail after leaving the city of Nazareth is here in the Arab village of Kfar Khanum. With a population of roughly 20,000, it's home to a very important church which commemorates the site and the story that is found in the Gospel of John, where Jesus is attending a wedding that has run out of wine. He then takes 6 jugs of water and turns it into the finest wine anyone at the wedding had ever tasted. It is believed by Christians that this is the first miracle performed by Jesus. Let's now continue along the Gospel Trail. The mountain you see behind me is an extinct volcano known as the Horns of Hittim. It comes from the Hebrew word chita, which means wheat, as wheat grows in this area. It's not mentioned in the Christian scriptures, and yet it's part of the Gospel Trail, as this would have been the route taken by anyone traveling from Nazareth to Capernaum. It's also the site of a famous battle that took place there in July of 1187 between the Arabs, who were led by Salah ad-Din, and the Crusaders. The Crusaders were defeated in this battle. There's also a kibbutz, Kibbutz Levi, located just on the other side, which makes for a perfect stop while hiking the Gospel Trail in order to learn about the kibbutz movement here in Israel as they offer tours of their facilities. Let's now continue along the Gospel Trail towards the Arbel Cliffs. One of my favorite places along the Gospel Trail are the Arbel Cliffs you can see behind me. Standing tall like a sentinel overlooking the Sea of Galilee, it's the most noticeable landmark in the entire area. Just imagine, as it overlooks the international highway connecting the empires of Mesopotamia and Egypt, it must have seen hundreds of armies, travelers, and even disciples pass before it. The cliffs themselves are speckled with numerous caves that provided military refuge for various rebels fighting against governments here in the land. Most notable are the Maccabees, who were fighting against the Greeks in the Jewish story of Hanukkah. Or the rebel forces fighting against Rome in the year 66 CE. And even rivals against King Herod hid in those caves. However, King Herod proved himself to be a brilliant military tactician as he built these large cranes that could lower soldiers down to the caves where they defeated the rebels. And this is why Rome chose him to become king here in the land of Israel. But the best part of the cliffs is the magnificent view you get from the top. You can see the entire Sea of Galilee, the surrounding communities, and many of the important sites along the Gospel Trail. Places like Mount of Beatitudes, Tabqa, Capernaum, all of which we are going to visit later on. But first, let's head down to the seashore where an important discovery was made. Directly behind me, along the shores of the Sea of Galilee, after a long dry period here in Israel and the shoreline beginning to recede, two local fishermen from a kibbutz here known as Ginosar were walking along the new shoreline when they discovered a nail. They knew that this wasn't a normal nail. It had to have been an old, ancient nail. They began to dig through the mud and they discovered ancient pieces of pottery, a oil lamp and an arrowhead. They were so excited that they ran to a local archaeologist who determined that these pieces dated back to the Second Temple period. Returning with their friend, they began to dig deeper into the mud, finding more planks of wood and ancient nails and pieces of pottery. And sure enough, they came to the realization that what they just discovered was an ancient Galilean boat dating back 2,000 years to the period of the Second Temple and Jesus. Let's now head in to the Yigal Allon Center, where that ancient boat has been preserved and put on display. We can't say for certain who the boat belonged to. Maybe it belonged to a simple fisherman fishing here in the Sea of Galilee. Or maybe it was one of the warriors fighting against the Romans in the year 66 CE at the Battle of Migdal. Or maybe it belonged to Jesus and his disciples. Nonetheless, we know that this ancient Galilean boat sailed the Sea of Galilee 2,000 years ago during the Second Temple period. The preservation process of this ancient Galilean boat began as soon as archaeologists were brought to the scene. You see, they were afraid that if the wood dried out, it would turn to dust. In order to prevent this, as they were professionally digging out the boat, they were covering it in polyurethane. This both protected the boat as well as enabling it to float when the time was right. As soon as that time arrived, they floated the boat to the shores of Kibbutz Ginosar, where a special crane removed it from the water and brought it to dry land, and inside, where they used over 65 tons of chemicals in a 9-year preservation process before bringing it here to the Yigal Allon Museum.
There are moments in life that define you and leave you forever transformed. Like a once-in-a-lifetime journey to the source of your faith. Walk in the steps of Jesus and experience history beyond its words. Sail the ancient Sea of Galilee to the holy shores of the River Jordan. Your journey begins here.
The museum also features a section dedicated to the legacy of Yigal Allon, who was a pioneer who served in the Palmach, which was an elite fighting force within the Haganah, which predated the IDF. He fought for Israel's independence, as well as becoming a statesman who advocated for coexistence between Arabs and Jews. In addition, the kibbutz here at Ginosar also offers country lodging with several different style rooms in a beautiful setting, right along the shores of the Sea of Galilee with their own private beach and a beautiful pool. They have a full-service restaurant and a reception that's open 24 hours a day. This is a perfect place to rest your bones while walking, riding, or traveling along the Gospel Trail. You know, it's really amazing to visit all of these historical sites along the Sea of Galilee, to walk amongst the ruins from the Second Temple period, and of course to visit the boat that was discovered here from the time of Jesus. But if you're like me, you also want to experience what those times were like. Well, thank God, two friends in 1991 decided to team up and to build a boat as a replica of the ones that were discovered from Jesus' time. They opened the Holy Land Sailing, where you could go out on a boat to sail the beautiful waters of the Sea of Galilee. And once in the middle of this gorgeous lake, you get a 360-degree view of the surrounding areas where the settings to many of the stories in the Christian scriptures took place. Places like Tabqa, Capernaum, Mount of Beatitudes, Bethsaida, and this just names a few of them. In addition, they also have the same style fishing nets that would have been used by Andrew and Simon and some of the other apostles of Jesus. They throw them over the side in order to reenact what it was like to fish here on the Sea of Galilee 2,000 years ago. In addition, the team here also offers the opportunity to raise the flag of whatever the nation is that the group comes from. Today I'm sailing with a group from Singapore, and they all stood up as the national anthem of that nation was played and their flag was raised right underneath the flag of the State of Israel. We finally arrived to the first church on the Gospel Trail that's located directly on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. It's known as Tabqa, and it's well known amongst Christians for a number of reasons, but there's one that sets it aside from all others, and that is the miracle in the story of the multiplication of the loaves and fish. When Jesus is preaching to the multitudes and time for supper grows near, and they collect all the food that they had, they realize that they only had 2 fish and 5 loaves. And yet Jesus is able to say a blessing, break it apart, and divide it amongst everyone, and there's enough to satiate the bellies of the hungry. The church you see behind me has been rebuilt several times due to the fact that it was destroyed during the various Muslim empires that ruled this area. However, the mosaic on the floor of the church is still the original one from the church that stood here in the early Byzantine period over 1,600 years ago. The second church here in Tabqa commemorates a story within the Christian scriptures that occurs after the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. In fact, it's the 4th time that Jesus will make himself known after the resurrection. In this story, Jesus asks Peter, "Do you love me?" 3 times. And this is because Peter denied Jesus earlier 3 times. The church is built directly over the stone in which they believe that Jesus appeared before Peter. And the account of this story is given over in the Gospel of John. One of the popular stops along the Gospel Trail is on the Mount of Beatitudes. The Christian scriptures go on to describe the scene of Jesus coming down from the Arbel cliffs and approaching the town of Capernaum. There, he'll begin to preach to the masses, and his popularity begins to grow. People as far south as Jerusalem come to hear him teach, and of course, from all over the Galilee. Literally, thousands of people. At this point, in the beginning of his ministry, he climbs up here to the top of Mount of Beatitudes, and he'll give over the famous 8 benedictions, the most popular one being that the meek shall inherit the earth. Behind me, you can see the church designed by the famous architect Antonio Barlucci, who designed it in an octagonal shape, one side for each benediction.
There are moments in life that define you and leave you forever transformed. Like a once-in-a-lifetime journey to the source of your faith. Walk in the steps of Jesus and experience history beyond its words. Sail the ancient Sea of Galilee to the holy shores of the River Jordan. Your journey begins here.
Just south of the Gospel Trail, on the northern end of the city of Tiberias, along the shores of the Sea of Galilee, is an incredible Oriental restaurant by the name of Pagoda. And you might ask yourself, David, why are you suggesting that we go eat Oriental food while visiting Israel? Simply put, this is the best Oriental food I've ever had. From the lemon chicken to the Szechuan beef to the coconut chicken soup. Every dish is absolutely divine. So if you need to take a break while hiking, driving, or biking through the Gospel Trail, make sure to stop by Pagoda at the northern end of Tiberias. We are now in Capernaum, the last stop along the Gospel Trail, and quite possibly the most significant one. As Jesus would have left Nazareth, stopping at many of the sites we visited today, he would have ended up here in Capernaum in order to move in with Peter and Peter's mother. However, the first place that he comes to in the village is the place of gathering known in Hebrew as a Beit Knesset or synagogue. And he does this because it's the Holy Sabbath, and the entire community would have been congregating in this location. You see, I'm standing right now in a synagogue that was constructed in the 4th century CE, which is roughly 400 years after the life of times of Jesus. However, it's built directly on the ruins of the synagogue that was here during the Second Temple period. It can be difficult to determine the exact location where events took place nearly 2,000 years ago. However, here at Capernaum, most experts and religious authorities do believe that this was the exact location of Peter's house. And this is due to the fact that, well, first of all, there is a plethora of ruins that date back to the Second Temple period, giving visitors a good understanding of what a village would have looked like here in the Galilee during the time of Jesus. But that's not all. There's also ruins from an early Byzantine period church that was believed to have been built right on the grounds of where Peter's house was. Today, there's a modern church that's built on top of it, with a window looking down at that original church. So Capernaum is a great place to visit to get a better understanding of what the area looked like during the Second Temple period. Israel's National Park of Capernaum marks the official end of the Gospel Trail. The park itself stretches for over 4 miles of shoreline on the Sea of Galilee and consists of many of the sites we visited today. The park contains many nooks and coves for personal reflection, meditation, and group prayer. There's also a dock here which is used by many of the companies that sailed the wooden boats that we rode on earlier. Join us next time on Land of the Bible as we head to the northern part of Israel in order to learn more about the Talmudic era in the Galilee. This has been such an informative day as we've traversed the Galilee on the Gospel Trail, which began in Nazareth and ended here in Capernaum. Thank you for watching Land of the Bible. And remember, I'm David Sussman, your personal tour guide here in the land of Israel. And make sure to join us next time as we connect you to the people, places, and land of the Bible.